Whether you're a bird brain or a wise old owl, you'll love this week's episode as we fight an uphill battle to understand a language filled with metaphors. Grammar Girl here. I'm Mignon Fogarty, and you can think of me as your friendly guide to the English language. We talk about writing, history, rules, and other cool stuff. This week, we'll answer a fourth grader's question about the phrase, "It's all downhill from here." And then we'll explore some fun animal idioms. This segment is by Samantha Enslin, and here's a question from Henry.
Hi, Mignon. I'm Henry, a fourth grader from Buffalo, New York. Last night, my dad and I were reading the sixth book in a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. In this series, the narrator defines words or phrases. As the children are about to start climbing up a very high staircase, the doorman jokes, "There's one good thing about this staircase. It's all uphill from here." The narrator defines "it's all uphill from here" as meaning things will get better in the future. However, I find conflicting definitions online, and most say it means things will get worse. What does "it's all uphill from here" really mean?
Henry asks a great question and one that's trickier than you'd expect. Here's the story. If we look at the phrase, "it's all uphill from here," logically, it should mean that things are getting difficult. Imagine riding a bike. When you're headed into an uphill climb, you know that things are going to be rough. In the same vein, logically, "it's all downhill from here" should mean that things are getting easier. You're coasting downhill, wind in your hair, your feet resting on the pedals. Everything is easy peasy. Except when it comes to these two phrases, nothing's easy. Here's the problem. Phrases that include the word up tend to have a positive connotation. When we upgrade our software, we're switching to a better version. When you have the upper hand on someone, you have the advantage. The upper crust of society are fancy folks who live in the highest social strata. If you tend to look at the upside of things, you're an optimist. And if things are on the up and up, everything's legit. In contrast, phrases that use the word down tend to have a negative connotation. For example, if you're sad, you may be down in the dumps. Someone who's impoverished could be down and out, down at heel, or down on their luck. If you're facing an epic fail, that means everything is going down the drain or down the tubes. So, because of our long history with phrases like this, we start to see why someone would think that all uphill might be good and that all downhill might be bad. To add one more layer of complexity, the word downhill itself is what's called a Janus word. That means it has two equal but opposite meanings. One definition of downhill is easy, the other is progressively worse. Wow. So, considering this, you can see why the phrases "it's all uphill" or "downhill from here" can cause a lot of confusion. If you're going to use them, especially in writing, the safe thing to do is add context. For example, don't send your friends a text saying, "We just took Rover to the veterinarian. It's all downhill from here." Your friends might start freaking out. Is your puppy sick? Is he going to die? To reduce everyone's stress, add context. For example, you could say something like this: "We just got back from taking Rover to the vet. Great news. It's all downhill from here. He just needs one more week of antibiotics and then he's good to go." That sounds better, right? So that's your public service announcement for today. Don't assume readers will know what you mean if you say something is all uphill or all downhill from here. Add a little context to help everyone understand your meaning. And thanks for the question, Henry. That segment was written by Samantha Enslin, an award-winning writer who runs the writing and editing agency Dragonfly Editorial. You can find her at dragonflyeditorial.com. This next segment is by Valerie Friedland. Have you ever squirreled something away to use later, pigged out on M&Ms, or been a bit of a chicken? Well, very likely you have, but did you ever think about why we have a tendency to use animal names for human behaviors? Since animals and humans have coexisted and often feared each other for thousands of years, maybe it makes sense that we'd assign certain characteristics to those animals based on our experiences with them. When we notice squirrels busily storing away multitudes of acorns, pigs eating anything and everything, and chickens fleeing at the early signs there might be danger, it certainly doesn't seem like such a stretch to see ourselves in some of those tendencies. And after all, who knows what animals are saying about us behind our backs with their barks, meows, and oinks? When we compare animal behavior to human behaviors, it actually says more about us than it does about the animals. We're looking at them through our own eyes and using metaphors to describe actions that are really just natural for them. So when we call pigs gluttonous or chickens weak and scared, we're actually just projecting our own values onto them. By making these comparisons, we're showing how we see ourselves in these animals. Since most people think of animals as being worth less than humans, despite how you might feel about Fluffy, many of these animal terms end up being quite negative. For example, snake, weasel, and rat. Indeed, humans have long used animal terms to dehumanize and degrade ethnic groups who they feel are beneath them. For example, calling people dogs, apes, and ants. So, in exploring the history of how some of these terms came to be, we'll probably learn a lot more about the humans who used them than the animals that inspired them. Not surprisingly, one of the animal names that's often been used to describe human behavior is man's best friend, the dog. What is surprising, given the way we call them fur babies and buy them sweaters today, is that when we use the word dog to refer to people, we clearly haven't always held them in high regard. When you call someone a dog, it usually isn't considered a great compliment. And we've been using dog in this derogatory way for centuries. In fact, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, we first find such contemptuous use as early as the 11th century, where dakiana was used to describe the people who brutally tortured a 4th century deacon, St. Vincent, who refused to renounce his faith. Clearly, not a positive portrayal of what it is to act like a dog. Now, interestingly, although the word dog is very common today, its etymological history is a little murky. In Old English, the Germanic word hund was the generic way to refer to our companion canines, and the word dog appears to have been a rare term used to refer to a particular type of powerful, fierce, and darker colored hund. The earliest version of the word doja only appears once in writing in Old English, in that story about St. Vincent, and it's hypothesized to have come from the word dox, an Old English adjective describing a dark or dusky color. People started using the word more commonly and generically in Middle English, where it appeared as doga, D-O-G-G-E, though according to the Middle English Dictionary, it was most often used in an unflattering and insulting way. But regardless of where it came from, dogs were clearly viewed as more utilitarian than cuddly in these early times. And they were prized for their hunting prowess and coarse nature, spawning the negative sense we mean when we say someone is acting like a dog today. Another set of creatures that have taken on more than their fair share of negative press are weasels and their kin badgers. Compared to weasels, who are anthropomorphized as two faced and deceitful, badgers have it pretty easy, only being maligned as annoyingly relentless in pestering you about that trash you need to take out or that colonoscopy appointment for which you are overdue. But both creatures have gotten a bad rap in terms of the behaviors they've come to represent. Although weasels have a reputation for sneaking into coops and killing chickens that don't belong to them, they're just trying to keep themselves fed. But their voracious appetite sometimes led them to literally bite off more than they could chew. And this tendency to kill and then store dead animal bodies for a later meal didn't help their image much, especially with the farmers owning the aforementioned chickens. This behavior is a pretty smart one from the perspective of long term survival, but in the social world of humans, considered pretty murderous. Thus, weasels showed up as the bad guys in animated films like Disney's The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad from 1949. And the rest, as they say, is history, at least in terms of our beliefs about those with weaselly natures. Now, the association of badgers with pestering or annoying behavior comes not from natural badger tendencies per se, but from a more disturbing and very human activity, the sport of badger baiting, which was very popular in 19th century Britain. In this event, badgers were led into boxes or barrels that were open on one side, and dogs were set upon them. It's not quite clear whether it's the dog's tenacious pursuit of the trapped badgers or the badgers' tenacious defense of their lives that inspired this association. But either way, it certainly does not speak well of the humans who organized it. Not surprisingly, the dogs and/or badgers often met with a bad fate, which is likely the origin of the term to badger someone to death. And how about our fondness for calling out feckless or sinister sorts as rats or snakes? Again, it's related to how humans have come to view rats and snakes as dirty, diseased, dangerous, and for snakes at least, slippery. Probably not a very fair assessment of animals who are simply trying to live their best lives, as well as ignoring the fact that snakes are actually quite helpful at getting rid of annoying pests like, well, rats. Likewise, squirrels, pigs, and chickens, with their respective acorn collecting, voracious eating, and running away, are just trying to not starve or become someone else's meal, though we again tend to view their behaviors as more intentional and in a negative light. What becomes clear as we consider the history behind our animal to human metaphorical language is that we have a great tendency to view the behavioral traits of animals through a very human centered lens. And this generally ends up making us the ones that look like the bad guys. That segment was written by Valerie Friedland, a professor of linguistics at the University of Nevada in Reno, and the author of Like Literally, Dude, Arguing for the Good in Bad English. You can find her at valeriefriedland.com. And finally, I have a Familect story from Michelle.
Hello, Griff Girl. This is Michelle from Paxton, Massachusetts, with a Familect word for you. I was amused to learn that another listener has the word kiku in his Familect, meaning cookie. Our middle daughter, Eliana, as a toddler, taught us a similar word, kaku, but kaku means either cookie or cracker. In British English, the word biscuit serves this purpose, but biscuit is more of a bread roll in American English, so we use the word kaku instead. It also can mean dog treat, according to our border collie, who just got rewarded with a dog treat for recognizing the word. Thank you for your podcast.
Thank you, Michelle. And here's a little aside. You may have noticed that Michelle said that biscuit can mean either cookie or cracker in British English. And I thought that was interesting. It scratched at my brain a bit because I thought I had heard something different. So I looked around and wow, is this more complicated than I'd imagined? I did a poll on Mastodon asking for responses from only British people, and the results were almost evenly split. 41% of respondents said a British biscuit is only a sweet cookie, and 45% said a British biscuit can be either a cookie or a cracker, and 14% of the respondents said it's something else. I got many, many comments with many different explanations. It turns out there was even an entire episode of the podcast Pants in the Boots, which I listened to, just arguing about what biscuit means in British English. I think maybe what I'd call a cracker is usually a cracker in British English, except when it's a specific kind of cracker called a water biscuit, or possibly when talking about cheese and biscuits. But honestly, I still don't know. At this point, I'm not sure anyone knows, and please don't call or write to me about it. If you want to share the story of your Familect, a family dialect, or word your family and only your family uses, call the voicemail line at 83321-4GIRL, and I might play it on the show. Be sure to tell me the story behind your word or phrase and call from a quiet place. Grammar Girl is a quick and dirty tips podcast. Thanks to my audio engineer Nathan Semes and my editor Adam Cecil. Our ad operations specialist is Morgan Christianson. Our marketing and publicity assistant is Davina Tomlin, our digital operations specialist is Holly Hutchings, and our intern is Kamryn Lacy. And I'm Mignon Fogarty, better known as Grammar Girl. That's all. Thanks for listening.